This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. I want to thank my latest supporter on Patreon, Jean. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, as well as existing patrons, Curtis, Melissa, Susan, Joseph, John, Ruby, Sharon, Joel, Lars, Raymond, Rob, Peter, Tracy, Jimmy, and Jason. Thank you all for supporting the podcast. It makes a big difference. If you are interested in having an ad-free experience of the podcast, you too can become a patron at any level at patreon.com/gracefulatheist. I'm very excited to announce that we now have merch. Arlene has gone through all the work to set up a merchandise shop with various logos for the Graceful Atheist podcast. You can get t-shirts, mugs, and all kinds of things. The link will be in the show notes. Please check that out. Please consider joining our private Facebook group, Deconversion Anonymous, and become a part of the community. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. First, a content warning. Today's episode includes sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, and very complex mental health disorders. If you would find that difficult in any way, you may want to sit this one out. Arlene interviews our guest today, Kyler. Kyler suffers from dissociative identity disorder, which is a form of CPTSD, and this stems from the sexual abuse that he experienced as a child, as well as the spiritual abuse that he experienced. In Kyler's words, his story is one of beauty from the ashes. Here is Kyler telling Arlene his story.
Kyler, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to hear your story. You and I have actually connected in real life through your wife. And yeah, I'm excited to hear your story. You and I were just talking before we started recording. Is there any background you want to give before I say, okay, tell me about your spiritual life growing up?
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be my story kind of almost has two stories in a way because so in 2018 I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. Which for some people know it as multiple personalities. It's also, it sits in the CPTSD category versus just PTSD. And so my story is a little different because the first part of my life is almost seen from one perspective and the second part of my life is kind of seen from another, just via the way DID works. And so there's kind of this, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just two kind of different perspectives where it's kind of like an on-off switch in a way.
Okay. I think people are going to resonate with your story regardless of all this. This will be awesome. CPTSD. What does that stand for?
So that's the C essentially complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. So it's kind of what they take something like DID, which is a diagnosis that PTSD fits in, but it's more so complex. It's just a complex version of it.
Okay, I've heard, and tell me if I'm wrong, I've heard Dr. Laura Anderson say PTSD is like there isn't a beginning and an end. It's not like there's a traumatic event. It's like this, you can't know for certain when it started and ended.
Yeah, so
or if it ended.
CPTSD, so specifically with DID, is usually an extended period of abuse, whether that's sexual, spiritual, physical. Oftentimes it comes from the sexual abuse side versus the other ones, but it can. So it's an extended period of abuse, usually at a young age. And so that's where you can't really pinpoint a day and go, on this day, it's just a buildup of trauma.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Well, Kyler, thank you again for being here, and
Yeah.
tell us about the religious environment that you grew up in.
I think I was one of those like homebred Christians, in a way, where you're the son of a wannabe worship leader, who's the son of a pastor, right? And so
Ah,
I grew up very, um, you know, church from the beginning, baptized at a young age, all of that kind of BS that goes along with that, right? Um, and so we started. So like the first part of our, I guess, life as a child was very much in the Nazarene church, which is kind of a lose your salvation. If you sin, don't ask God for forgiveness, and die, you're probably going to hell kind of deal,
oh,
right?
wow.
Like
Okay.
not even like um, you don't even get like a 24-hour kind of grace period,
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's definitely um, every Sunday is a call to the altar. Every Sunday you gotta, it's not quite Catholic where you have to go in and talk to a priest, but very much a Sunday at the altar call, make you feel guilty. Then we jumped on the Reformed train.
Oh,
So
wow. That's a big
Calvary,
jump.
it is a big jump, right, to go from one to the other. Part of that is due to my parents getting kicked out of um, most of the churches we went to for some reason or another. I have my guesses as to why we got kicked out, but um, I'm not quite sure the reasons why we always had to leave. Um, the few that I can remember were mostly them yelling and screaming at people as we kind of left, kind of deal.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
but then we went to Calvary Chapel, which Chuck Smith, kind of this um, in the 70s, I think it was, kind of started evangelizing to the hippies kind of deal.
Hmm.
And they're very, I looked up the word because I wanted to know what it was, expository teaching. So instead of doing, yeah,
It's not topical, like you just go through
correct.
the whole
Yeah.
Bible.
You
Oof.
pick
Yes.
you pick a book, all that fun
Hmm.
stuff. So that's kind of the environment we grew up in as a kid and early adult, was this kind of homegrown Christian. You didn't really have a choice. You were kind of saved out of, you know, just living in a Christian home, quote unquote, Christian home.
Yeah. Am I right? Were you homeschooled also?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So homeschooled um, was added onto that. So that adds a whole nother layer of,
Yes.
we weren't like the whole, the long skirt, um, you know, homeschoolers. We like to think of ourselves as the cool homeschoolers when we were
Ah, okay.
kids, but yeah, homeschool added a whole nother level. So obviously all my education came from a biblical background and a biblical, um, you know, topics, and, all the curriculum is
Hmm.
biblical, all of that stuff. So
Oh, yes. You are not the first homeschool, adult homeschool kid
yeah.
to be on here. Oh, heavens. So is this high school, college? Like what's happening
Also,
next?
all the way up till high school, we in a way dropped out of school, but also didn't. We had enough credits technically to graduate, but our mother would not let us. And so she wanted us to do a whole nother year. And then we said, fuck that. We're going to do what we want. So they
Yeah.
moved. I didn't move with them. Um, and then I did the real stupid thing and went to Bible college.
Oh, also not the
Yeah.
first one on the podcast to have
If
gone to Bible college.
if you want to lose your salvation, for anybody listening that's a Christian, go to Bible college. It's the
Oh,
best way to do it.
and why do you say that? I'm
Uh,
curious.
the the amount of Jesus that they throw at you is like drinking from a fire hydrant, and so you just kind of get, one, you start to, I think, dive into more of the um, the history of the Bible, and you start to find more
Mm-hmm.
questions, or you start to learn about the Greek and all that, and you start to go, wait a second, this doesn't it doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
as a regular Christian, I think you can just kind of see the top layer of things and not dive too deep. When you start to get into like, where did this come from? Where did that come from? You start to go, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did not go to Bible college. I was not a Christian. I didn't grow up in it or anything. I became a Christian in college at a public university. So the heathens were all around me, but Jesus found me. And so I did not have that experience, but I have heard multiple people talk about like you learn how to study the Bible, you learn exegesis and
Yep.
hermeneutics and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's there more and more questions come that
Yeah.
don't have really satisfying answers.
I have no satisfying answers, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
the problem. Is you start to realize that it's just a book written by people, and you start to really get into these questions that the Bible college is trying to teach you one way, but you're starting to look at it and go, but you don't have an answer to any of these other questions I'm asking, right? Like, I get what you're trying to teach me, but let's hold up here and answer this question. And they're just like, trust God. And you're like, no, that doesn't really
Oh,
work.
mm-mm. Yeah. And it's like this weird use logic and Bible study tools and all this on the one
Yep.
hand, but then when the questions get too difficult, it's like, oh, you just have to trust the Lord.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't, how
Have
do,
faith,
who
right?
gets to pick? Yeah, who gets to pick
Yeah.
which
When do I
questions get answers?
use logic and when do I don't? That's probably what
Yes.
got me into the most trouble as a kid in the church too, was always wanting to ask the why question, right? Of why this, why that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you went to Bible college. Was it a good experience? Was it not a great experience? What?
It was it was a lot of bad and some good, I think. I think
Okay.
there were like, it was bad to the point where like the person of the Bible college tried to get it go as far as like controlling things, like the relationship I was in with Lily, my wife at the time,
Mm-hmm.
would ask questions about our personal life and intimacy, and you're just kind of like,
Oh, wow.
it's kind of none of your business, you know.
Mm-mm.
um, what I would do. But surprisingly, the missions trip that we did at the end was the best experience of Bible college that there was. It was a really cool experience for us. We went to Kyrgyzstan when it was overthrowing its government. And
Oh,
so we were
wow.
there as the riots were happening and as this government was being overthrown. So it was pretty cool to experience some of those things. It was kind of like a nice, this is the real world kind of experience.
Mm.
Looking back, obviously in the moment it was this great ministering opportunity, right? Where we're, oh man, the Lord, blah blah blah, this and that. Um, but looking back now, I can go. So it was a real world moment for us to just kind of go, um, learn a lot and look at the world, and I think a different point of view. Um, it's kind of how I view that moment now versus the Christian way you would view it in the moment.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a country that does not come up in American news very often to know anything about what's happening in. So
No,
that's awesome that
it's
you.
it's technically a third world country, um, and so there were some cool experiences of getting to see these nomadic people and getting to drink glacier water right out of mountains, kind of deal, and natural hot
Wow.
springs kind of thing. But like, the outside looking in, it was a big, um, I think, a real world moment for a very doe-eyed, you know, young man
Hmm.
at the time.
Yeah, because homeschooling to Bible college
Yep.
to yeah, completely different culture in a different on a different continent. Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that was at the end of Bible college.
That was at the end of Bible college.
Were you and Lily married yet? Or what happened next?
No, so we got engaged while I was at Bible college, and so we had been dating for a while, And Bible college only kind of happened because I had planned to play baseball my whole life, but blew my knee in high school, and so kind of lost all the opportunities I had to play baseball. And so we were kind of dating. We were dating, went to Bible college, got engaged, and then got married the next year, I believe. Yes, we got married the next year.
You have to check the timeline. I
I do
love
have
it.
to check the timeline. I'm terrible with dates. I'm terrible with dates due to just like numbers, and a timeline for me can get very mushed up and very messy, just due to the way DID works. So
Okay, so the DID diagnosis did not come, you said, till 2018. So
yep.
what's happening in between these years? Like, is Christianity still working for you?
So this is kind of where I think I don't know, for me, deconstructing wasn't so much like these moments of research or moments of like, it was more a moment of watching the church for years fail everybody and fail me, fail my family, fail, just completely fail. And so during this time, there would have been 3 kids born. Two kids born. One was born after my diagnosis. There was a lot of, I think, pain and hurt and anger on my side, and not knowing where to direct it, and not knowing where to, and not getting the answers out of anybody, church, world, nothing. There was a suicide attempt, in a way, a very, not so much, more of a suicidal ideation that was with a plan and with a desire to do. I did have 2 attempts as a teenager that obviously failed. I'm not very good at it. But sorry, that
I'm
kind of
glad.
me too. Look, hindsight 2020. I'm glad that I'm not, I'm 0 for
Yes.
3 with that. So there were, there was a psych ward visit, and lots of attempted therapy, and then some, and then finally in 2018, um, there were the right people in the right place to kind of step in and help with what was going on.
Good. And so you said Christianity had been working for you, but you said the deconstruction, you said the church was failing people. Was it just like personally, or?
So there were several things. So failing in the sense, so we went to a church here in Atlanta that was very, I'm going to say yuppie. So lots of people who,
Okay.
had money, and lots of people who, not works based, but looking at it, you could definitely, it was more of a like, throw your money at people instead of helping people.
Prosperity gospel kind
Not
of
so
thing?
much prosperity gospel as much as you just had all these rich people who said, well, why don't I just give money to these people instead of actually going to help these people?
I see. Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the big ways that me and Lily that the church started to fail us on at the beginning, was our second oldest son getting diagnosed with anxiety and Asperger's, and the church had no answer or care to help us. They watched us constantly sit outside the sermons because he couldn't be in them. We couldn't take him to childcare, and they just didn't do anything about it. They just didn't care,
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And so we sat silently suffering in the church, while they just kind of did their crap, and let us sit out there and didn't do anything other than try to tell us, you let your kid cry it out, or that kind of thing. And so
Gotcha.
and then it also failed in the form of wanting to get messy with people who were messy, right? They wanted to be a church. They wanted to be a place that, let messy people join, but they wanted you to join so you could become, right? So you could change. They didn't want to. I think they tried to deal with your mess and all the shit and all the baggage that you carried, but they really had no answer for it. And they just wanted to point you to this counselor or this Bible study or this men's group or this, and it's like, no, I've got questions about why I was, sexually assaulted by 10 plus men. I don't really give a crap about you know, um, your Bible study. I want to, but which at the time, I didn't exactly know about all of this, because the way DID works is it will suppress those memories. And so I'm this, person who has PTSD, has no clue what it's really from, has all this trauma and pain and hurt, and has no clue what it's from. And the church just wants to throw Bible verses and stuff at you, doesn't want to help you. And so that was kind of the biggest failing. Kind of happens after we got our diagnosis of DID.
Okay.
So that comes a little later in the story, but the failing where I kind of lost my shit on this church and pulled every elder and the pastor aside that I knew, cussed them out and said, "Screw you," happened a little later in the storyline. So what kind of happened was I struggled a lot with depression, self-harm, just feeling like a worthless piece of shit, really, honestly, and not really knowing why in life, why I had these feelings. And we kind of had this, we had the car wreck, and that kind of brought forward for us at the moment that there's these people in our head talking, and they're different people than who I am, right?
Okay.
I don't recommend the movie, but the movie Split we were watching, and afterwards the personality at the time went, "That's us." That actually happens in our mind, like what's happening in
Oh,
this
wow.
movie, that happens. And so we started to walk down kind of a path of seeking how to get help for that. We had gone to a Christian therapist who, the next two people I'm going to talk about, if more Christians were like them, we'd still probably be Christian. Like the type of people where you can actually see love and kindness and just general want to help you, right? Like if the church was like them, holy shit, they would move the mountains that they think they could, right? And they would be the force for good that they think that they are. We did a personality test before we had our diagnosis, and the guy was like, "I need you to do another one," and we're like, "Okay." And we did a second one, and they didn't match up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he was like, as just a counselor, he couldn't exactly diagnose us with DID, multiple personalities, but he was like, "Yeah, I think you might have this," right? And we just kind of blew it off because, yeah, whatever, right? It wasn't until after the wreck and after Valentine's Day of 2018 where we got our official diagnosis, after we went to the psych ward again and got a diagnosis. At the same church we were at that was treating us like crap, right? They brought in a new counselor who was actually educated, was actually schooled on trauma and schooled on therapy and all of these things, right? Like an actual licensed professional was brought into and she was amazing. She was willing to, I might get emotional here, but she was willing to take the messy shit that was us and go, let me help you, not let me throw money at you, the, the amount of time she put into us was amazing, and I have nothing nothing bad to say about her, right? Like
That's awesome.
she never did anything in my eyes that she really was, like I said, if more people were like her, more people were
Yeah.
like the other counselor, I think there's a chance we'd still be a Christian, right? Maybe, probably not. We asked too many questions, but so we get diagnosed with our DID, and then we get on medicine. So we got on a ton of antidepressants and like help medicine to help with sleep, and
Okay.
From there, this is kind of where the story takes a little bit of a here's the second view on our life, because now enters all of these personalities, people who are, you know, different ages, different genders, different sexualities in our mind, right? Same body, but
Yeah.
it's almost like you have 10 roommates, 13 roommates sharing headspace, but living with one body, right? And it was very chaotic for a long time.
Mhm.
When you have personalities who are now able to be themselves, and they feel pain, they feel anger, they don't necessarily want to be married, they don't want to be a father, they don't,
Yeah.
or they're nonverbal, they don't talk, they're within a DID system called littles, and so they're, you know, 5, 6 years old. They don't
Oh,
know how to
wow.
communicate these things, right? They just know that they want a stuffed animal and to be comforted. They don't know they don't want to raise children,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it switched from um, it's kind of weird because Kyler is actually the um, the person that was hosting at the time up until we had DID. Host being the main person who runs the system, or the main person who you see in front of you every day, who um, does your day-to-day things. It can look very different for everybody who has DID, right? The way a host works can be the person who just does your daily tasks to the person um, who is, you know, out there the majority of the time. For us, it was the latter. He was more the Christian, and um, he was the one who Lily really dated, and Lily really, in a way, fell in love with.
Yeah.
And it had been his life that had been being lived essentially up until that point. Um, so enter all of these other people who want to have their own lives, including myself, right? And I know that can be a little confusing, the whole Kyler and me being. I still go by Kyler because it just makes the most sense, right?
Okay.
But I do go by a different name internally in the head, in the system. But it, you know, Kyler decided in a way to leave, to just be done, as an alter, and that kind of threw a big wrench into life, right? Because here you have me, who is a part of a system, who's not necessarily been. I've been there the whole time. I've seen all this stuff, but I've seen it from an internal point of view, and I don't believe in God at all. So here's where that kind of switch was: of he's gone, I want nothing to do with the church.
Oh, wow.
Um, and this kind of came after a very close friend of ours at the time. Their daughter was molested within the church by somebody in the church, and it was swept under the rug. And
Ah.
I still to this day have immense anger over it. Like, to watch people I respected at the time, or were respected at the time, to watch, and it was swept under the rug because the teenager that did it um, was the son of the best friend of the pastor.
Okay.
And um, I found out because obviously it's one of my closest friends at the time. It's his daughter, right? Like, there's no, like,
Yeah.
he was afraid, I think, at first to tell me because he knew I was going to lose my shit, and I did. I watched them let this family fall off the face of the earth and just say, fuck you. We're just going to leave you. We're going to cover this up. We're going to let you bleed dry, and we're not even going to check on you. We're not going to see how you're doing. We're not going to make sure your daughter has, therapy. We're just going to kind of, sorry that happened, blah, blah, blah. Trust God. When I found out, I individually pulled aside every elder. This was me and Kyler at the same time doing this as in a way of, I think, just pure anger of called them out as cowards, as poor leaders, as, why would you let you have a wolf in your sheep's pen? You're supposed to be the shepherd. How dare you? Kind of deal. Real men don't do this kind of thing. Like, you want to be some real Christian man, go fuck yourself, right? Like, and when I say I knew all the eldership, I knew all the eldership. Like, we were always that guy that was friends with everybody, but never quite ourselves the elder, right? Which I'm so glad we never were. And then the pastor did the same thing. Pulled him aside, told him he was a coward. How dare you cover this up? How dare you keep this quiet and not help this family? I was more upset about the helping the family than I was the keeping it quiet. I just kind of assumed that always happens in a church, right? But the whole just letting the family that suffered get hurt was too much for me. And that was kind of me as somebody, as an altar, would never, even if I had been considering Christianity at the time, I never would have after that, right? And then I think Kyler at the time, that was his just kind of like, the world sucks, I'm done with it moment. Why? We've asked all these questions, we've not gotten answers. When we get answers, they're just trust God, it's God's plan. Fuck his plan. You know what I mean? Kind of deal. Like, if that's his plan, I want nothing to do with it, right? If his plan is to let children be molested, if his plan is to let, the glory of himself come out because somebody's dad couldn't keep it in their pants, then fuck him. Like, I really want nothing to do with that. And so that's kind of the breaking, I guess, the moment for us where we were just done. We just as a whole, as a system, this was the biggest failure you could have, is to let this little girl get treated that way and then not do anything for her. I spent my whole life having nobody there, my questions for the church, through this time, right? We were asking earlier about, what was going on during this time. Part of this, my questioning was, where was Jesus? When I was being molested, where was he? Was he sitting in a room watching me? Because if so, that's just, why? How can you say you love me? Right? How can you say I have a plan for you? I've created you. I've done all these things, and then just go, oh, well, I was there, but I didn't do anything about it, right? That's not a loving, caring God.
No.
That's just a psychopath who enjoys watching things, if somebody did that as a human being, they'd go to jail, right?
Absolutely.
Why would I worship somebody like that, right? And so I don't know if we just decided. So, like, what I was saying earlier about how some people do the research, right, and they discover God's not real, or they, they have these moments that kind of lead. I more or less decided I wanted nothing less to do with God, and I wanted nothing more. I wanted to be as far away from His plan, quote unquote, or His design for me, as I could, because that was just bullshit. Whether he was real or not, whether he was the creator of the universe or not, I didn't care, and I don't care. Um,
Yeah.
I would rather, in a sense, burn in hell than spend eternity with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I very much understand that. That was a big part of my husband's deconversion, was just realizing, like, if I'm a better parent than the God I'm supposed to think is like all good and all knowing and
Yeah.
wise and loving, but I treat my children way better than he treats his creation, like, this
Yeah.
doesn't, I should not have better morals, be more ethical than the God I'm supposed to worship. And he was like, even if God is real, I'm not going to worship him. He's not
Yeah.
worthy of it.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I sit in that same boat of just like, you'll never get another ounce of my praise or
Mm-mm.
my, you know, it, and, it's just, and then, then you add on to knowing what I learned in what we learned in Bible college, knowing that there was just never these answers. We asked all these questions. Oh, this doesn't make sense. Why were you allowed to sleep with your daughter in this part of the Bible, but now you can't hear? Like, why were you,
Yeah.
all these things, like, that just, oh, there's Adam and Eve. They're the first creator. And then, like, their kids go off and meet other people. Where did they come
Yeah. Yeah.
from? Are we going to just
Just,
skip? Were they created? Did these kids have to have sex with their parents to have other kids to grow more? Like, just, if you read the Old Testament, it's fucked up, right? So you add
yes.
you add in all that, right? It's probably the scariest book you could ever read is the Old Testament. So you just add on in all of that, and we just decided we were done. And then I would say, probably about 3 years ago is where I, as an altar, started hosting and started taking over, right? That's 2020, kind of during the crazy pandemic, where I think everybody nowadays has a story of how how it changed their life, right? Everybody seems to have a cool, crazy, or fucked up story, right, of 2020. That's where I kind of really started to become who I am today. We stayed on our medicine up till about 6 months ago, I think it was now. We were just on such a high dosage that we either had to change medicine so that way we could do more, or we had to figure something else out because we were on so much antidepressants and so much. But it was amazing to see when we just decided, I'm done being a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
how much easier life got. Like, just
Yes.
our anxiety dropped, our depression dropped, our self-worth went up, skyrocketed. And not in a cocky way, just in a, like, oh, I'm actually worth something. Like, I'm not
Yes.
this piece of shit that needs this person to tell me every day that I'm, his and loved by him, right? Like, I in myself can just be this loved person.
Yep.
And we watched our happiness go up. We watched our joy continue to rise. It was a transition for us and other parts to come out, right? It was a transition to go from being, just altars in the head to now having to run the show and having to manage that and having to figure out how that was going to work with other parts. And a lot of it came down to just wanting to be the dad that we didn't have for these kids that we had in the house,
Yes.
right? Not wanting to see them grow up. And then, Lily just being fucking amazing and pouring herself into us and being there for us. And, lots of people, our mother-in-law, our father-in-law stepped up in ways that became parents where we didn't have them, right? Friends stepped in and just said, hey, I like you no matter what you choose, right? Like, I having people embrace the the DID side of our life is, I think, also what kind of helped, was just they were just like, oh, none of the Christians would have. Actually, when we were
Yeah.
a kid, we had a kind of an incident that happened, and I won't get into details with that because it's kind of gruesome, but one pastor actually tried to tell us we had demons inside of us.
Yeah.
And so
I would imagine that. I mean, what other explanation
demons,
can they
right?
have?
Oh,
Yeah.
you don't remember doing this for 3 hours long, but you did it. Well, it's a demon, obviously, right? And so, tried to have those cast out of me and prayed out of me and removed and all
Oh,
that.
I'm so sorry.
Well, it didn't work, obviously. Now we
Yeah.
have all these
I just
personalities.
think about little Kyler, little
I
kid.
was a
You.
teenager
Yeah.
at the time, so I wasn't as little, but
Oh,
I
okay.
definitely, the abuse for me stopped at like the sexual abuse for me, because there's sexual abuse, there's spiritual abuse within the church and pastors and that kind of stuff. There's physical abuse from my mother and verbal, like emotional abuse from her, that kind of was on and off, but also she was being abused by him, by our father.
Oh,
We refer to him as dipshit, so I have to
okay.
pause every time I say father. That's why, because, and we just call him dipshit. Um, so the abuse from dipshit, that stopped at like about 15 when we put him in the hospital for taking his knee out in a fight, and we were just done with it, and it just kind of stopped after that.
Yeah, you can only abuse someone as they're growing up until they
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
grown men. Yeah.
And Kyler at the time didn't remember doing that to him, whereas
Oh, okay.
parts in the head came out as protector and said, listen, now we're done, we're just
Yeah.
and so up until 15, the abuse is where it kind of stopped, and it was kind of just him as a teenager, but he shared us with other people, and we were also abused by our doctor. We were abused by people within the church too. So youth pastor, music pastor, worship leader, I should say, at the time, and then several other spatterings of just, I guess, random abuse. I don't know. If once you're abused, you just kind of have this target on your back that makes you look like, oh,
Oh,
that kid probably would let me do something to him without, saying anything, right? I was going somewhere with this, but it completely just escaped my brain as to where I was going. But
it's okay. You were just going back to, I think, give some more backstory to the abuse, like where all
yeah,
that had happened.
it was kind of a lifelong thing until we were. So you have all this childhood abuse that you can't. I know Lily told you I'm a bucket of trauma, right? Which is funny because you've got this childhood abuse, and then you've got this shit that just happens, this bad luck shit that happens to you as an adult. You blow your knee, right, twice. You have a miscarriage, that rips you to shreds, right? Literally, we had a miscarriage. I was on a flight the next day to find a place to live here. We move here. The job I was moving here for leaves me. Says now we're not actually gonna
Oh no.
hire you, but they go completely under, so we didn't get reimbursed for anything. So we're just kind of stuck here in Atlanta. And you just it just all starts to kind of add up, right? Car wreck. Just we owned a house that just seemed to, the plumbing just seemed to never want to work. It just kind of was
Mm-hmm.
all, you have all this stuff that as you get older is kind of adult stuff, but you pile that on with the childhood stuff, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
plumbing overflowing into your sink becomes a way bigger deal than what it should be,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that kind of goes back too to some of the church stuff, is just like they were never willing to like help you with that. They just wanted to throw money at you. Oh, just get this fit. Here's money to go do this. Here's money to do that. Never wanted to come in and help. But
Yeah. Giving of their time and their energy
yeah,
versus just throw money.
which is amazing to see. The non-Christian community almost feels not the opposite. Not that they won't give money, but man,
Oh yeah.
it's like, oh, you got a problem with your 3D printer? Cool, let's hang out. Let's figure it out. Let's get it done. Like,
We'll
oh,
figure it
you got a
out.
problem with your plumbing, oh, I know somebody, let's come over and help you get it fixed, right? It's really funny to see I'm going to call it the non-Christian community, be more loving and more like what Jesus would have been than the Christian community ever was.
Oh, man. Yeah. So where are you now spiritually? Like what do y'all believe or not believe?
I don't know. That's
Okay.
like
But isn't it nice to just not know and you don't have to have an answer?
exactly. I think that's where I'm at. Is I'm comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like people would be like, will ask you, well, what do don't you want to know what you believe? No, I don't actually. I think that allows me to be a more open-minded person. It
Okay.
allows me to have better conversations with humans and better conversations with individuals. Just I don't come from a prejudiced or a pre notion of what I believe and saying, well, no, it's this. So when you talk with someone who's Muslim or Jewish, or you talk with someone who's, a witch or into Wiccan or, all these things, you can really just have a good conversation about getting to know them and what they believe. And you don't have to worry about trying to convert them to anything. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay to be wrong too. I'm okay with if I died today and I was wrong. Okay, cool. Right? Once saved, always saved, right? If you're not Nazarene. And so I just I'm kind of go with the flow, right? Like I believe that there's probably I don't know if it's energy or spiritual or what, but obviously there's something, right? Whether
You
did
think so?
somebody yeah, did somebody create us and then just walk off? Is there someone who is a god but maybe isn't omnipotent? Um, is there nobody? Was it the Big Bang? Did we just kind of randomly come out of nowhere? I don't know. you know?
Yeah.
And I also don't know that I have the energy to care. Like
That's true. There's
like
so many other
honestly,
things,
right?
more pressing things
There's
to
just
figure out.
I rather I rather go play catch in the backyard with my son
Yeah.
than fuss over or worry about creation or existence or which is funny because we just if you would have known if somebody from our past saw who we were today, they'd be shocked that I wasn't willing to sit and um, apologetics was a big part of who we were. We could argue it's funny because that's probably part of what led us to ask why a lot was
Oh, maybe
we
so.
we could outthink pastors at a young age apologetically. I could put pastors in their place apologetically as some 10-year-old who's got some guy from seminar who I know understand more about the Bible and I can argue it better than you can and I can disprove your Nazarene or your Baptist or your non-denominational belief easily, right?
Yeah.
Um, so if you saw me now, if you saw this guy who just kind of doesn't care, obviously you wouldn't understand with the DID thing, right? But I think you'd be shocked because it's so hard after after all of that crap. You just you just kind of want to take a break. Like maybe one day I'll get to a point where I want to look at or read books about spirituality or want to, dive into, you know, energy or, crystals. I don't know. But, the way the planets
There are options.
yeah, but and it's like,
Sure.
we're all if you think about it, we're all, Christians call it prayer, scientists call it one thing, other people call it, putting it into existence, it's all the same. It's just a matter of kind of what perspective you come from with it. And for me, I'm just at a point where I think it's better for my life, for us as a human, for us as a father, for us as a partner to just not spend time diving into it
Yeah.
because it's just exhausting, right? To try to know what you believe, right? To know what you know, and to know it's just I'd rather just have fun conversations like this about belief and about, what you think, than try to figure out and pinpoint exactly what I believe.
Yeah, I love it. Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't ask that you wanted to talk about? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I feel like I rambled a lot, but um, I think I don't know if there's anything you should have asked. I would assume you did something wrong, but no, I think that it's our story is hard to tell because the DID throws this wrench into it of like you're not who you were back then, right? And so you you have this whole story that almost can be crumpled up and thrown out the window because I'm not that
Mm,
person. And I came in as a host, as an altar at the time when we needed to just step away from the church and we needed to not be in. And I have no qualms being that guy and going, well, fuck you. We're gone. Right? Like I'll pull
yeah.
us out of any situation and just be like, no, we're good. Forget it. Um, so I think, for us, it's just sad to see the church. It's always sad to see the church fail people in the mental health perspective,
Yes.
right? Mental health is such a
Yes.
big deal, and it feels like the world could be at a better mental health place if Christians would take on a better view of, like, the therapist who helped us. If the Christians had that view, oh my goodness, man, what a place we'd be in right now. We'd be in a great place. But everybody would, I think. And so it's hard to watch sometimes, I think, and look back and go, the worst part is when you look back and go, oh man, did I really say that at one point in time in life? Like, did I really fucking tweet that? Like, did I, and I think so. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about too was I think I used to be very homophobic. And a lot of that came from, I think, a couple things. One, you were raised in the 90s, right? I was. So everything was gay. You just said gay to everything, right?
Yeah, it was
And
an insult.
yeah, well, if you didn't like it, it was just gay, right?
Yeah.
I grew up, conservative Christian, so obviously you're told Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, right? And then you add on trauma from men. And so all you see is men who like men are bad. Men who like men do bad things, right?
Yeah.
Um, and thankfully, at our first like job we had was Starbucks, we constantly had to work with these two gay guys, and they were very willing to take our crap and let us ask some questions and let us talk about it a little bit, and let us just kind of realize that not all cats are black, right? And the logical,
Gotcha.
um, the logic puzzle, that just because these people did that, and actually the gay community aren't the ones that actually, it's the ones that pretend to be straight,
Yes.
that are the ones that do the harm, right?
Harming children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think after, we've grown to be very big supporters of the LGBTQ plus community, um, within the last, 10 plus years. I think even Kyler coming up was starting to realize and see those things. And, you loved or you hated what was it? Hate the sin, not the sinner kind of crap. All that
Yes.
saying
Ugh.
that's how he used to look at, um, homosexuality. But I think, as we've healed and as we've grown, we've been able to become very passionate supporters for that community, um, and even, um, find it pretty hard with nowadays political stuff going on, to to not to not feel the um, to feel what they're going through and stuff. And so,
Hmm.
um, it was really hard, I think, at first to overcome that. But as we walked out of the church, it became a lot easier to embrace that community, to love that community, to almost feel like they're the better community in a way, the more loving community, the kinder community. And so um, it's been nice to also look at communities and people differently and go, oh, wow, I got this wrong. And wow, that tweet and that Facebook post pops up in your history, right, in Facebook, and you're like, ugh. Like,
Oh,
did
yes.
I really say this at one point in time in life? Like, man, I'm sorry to whoever saw that,
Yes, yes. The stuff we believed, the stuff we preached, the stuff we thought about ourselves and others. Facebook memories are not always fun.
No,
Sometimes
no,
they're wonderful, but not
no.
always fun. Yeah.
Rarely for us are they good. They tend to bring back some stuff, where it's like, for us, we didn't know. So at the time when we got married, dipshit was in our wedding, right? And so, like, I can't look at any of our wedding pictures without getting triggered and stuff like that. So yeah, it sucks, but going back and looking at those times, you want to vomit or be like, man, I sucked as a
Yeah.
human. I sucked as a human
It's
being,
so
but
hard. Yeah.
I'm so glad I'm not that anymore, right?
Yes,
Like,
you're a different person.
I'm so glad I'm converted from being converted.
I like it. Kyler, thank you so
Yeah,
much for telling your story. Last question, do you have any recommendations that have helped you in any part of your journey? Podcasts, YouTube videos, books, anything?
I think the majority of my helping has just been go have conversations with actual people, and not that
Hmm,
books and podcasts and all that aren't great, but like for us, it was getting into the nitty gritty with real people,
I
and
love it.
um, surprisingly, I guess I will say this: if you've not read the Brandon Sanderson series, Stormlight Archives, right? That's the nerdy part of our journey. Would be
Okay.
those books gave us an outlet to cry, to feel, and it deals heavily with PTSD and actually has a character that has dissociative identity disorder in it. And there's a part in one of the books where I think that's the hardest I've ever cried in my life, and it was actually
Mm,
a pretty healing moment for us, to just to read it and see it, right? So fictional books, yeah, I guess have been, but a
no,
lot of
that's
it has
fantastic.
been talks with close friends, or people just loving us, people not giving a shit that we were this weird person with multiple personalities, that they just want to get to know us, and maybe even some of the personalities, kind of deal. So, um, yeah, I guess I'm not the most learned of people on your podcast, but no, for me
Oh,
it
no,
was
no, no.
for me it was fictional books and conversation with people, I think, is what I recommend.
No, I
Like,
love it. Conversations with people. Like how I'm a huge advocate for reading fiction because there are people who will only read
yeah,
nonfiction,
yeah,
which blows my mind. Like I think about fiction books. Like for me, things like Jane Austen, written,
hmm,
over a
yeah,
hundred years ago, still funny and still clever because
yeah,
people act the same way, like the
yeah.
same societal things and issues. And so fiction is a fantastic way to understand yourself and other people. Yeah.
Well, and fiction too, fiction that's not written within the world we live in now, that's written in its own kind of world and own space, is never gonna get outdated, right? Like, it's never
Hmm.
gonna have like a, well, that doesn't make sense now because we have TVs kind of thing, right?
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting. That's a good point. Yeah.
it kind of stays in its own time frame,
Hmm.
and so you can get lost in these worlds, and people like Brandon Sanderson and multiple other authors, he just happens to be my favorite, um, give you a space to get lost in and heal at the same time, and to get lost in and journey with these characters, love these characters, cry with these characters, rejoice with these
Yes.
characters. And it gives you a space outside of trauma. It gives you a space outside of the shit that is the world at times, to just kind of go, let me dive for 5 hours into this book,
Yes.
a
Oh,
week, and
I love it.
find a place to just kind of heal. and enjoy. So
yes. Oh, I love that explanation about fiction. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and have a fabulous day, Kyler.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My final thoughts on the episode. I am really thankful for Kyler's authenticity, his transparency, his willingness to tell their story. It breaks my heart when I think about like him when he was little and as a teenager, and the abuse suffered. I don't even know the reasons. You don't always know the why things happen, what adults were thinking when they did these things or allowed these things to happen. But like who he is now, who he's grown to be, and the partner that he is, the dad, it's amazing what getting away from religion, getting away from abuse, it's amazing how whole and full and happy and even clear-minded one can become when you don't have all the extra anxiety of, why is God not taking care of me? Where is God in the middle of this? Why hasn't God done something? How is this loving? Like it's so much. And it's amazing what our brains, like the lengths our brains will go to keep us alive. His mind did so much to keep him alive when he was little, as he got older, into adulthood. And it's just amazing. Our bodies, they're just amazing. Yeah, to keep him alive. I think my takeaway for myself personally is just another reminder of how great fiction can be for people. Just being able to have a world that you can get away to, even if it looks like our world or if it's completely different on a different planet or in this made up realm. It's good for us to be able to go places and, like he said, weep and rejoice and have all the emotions, but it's safe to be afraid, but it's safe. Fiction is just wonderful. Amazing movies, books, any kind of wonderful stories, true stories also. But anyway, thank you again, Kyler, for being on the podcast. I'm honored that you would tell your story.
The secular grace thought of the week is simply reach out and get help. Many of the faith traditions that we have been a part of have dissuaded us from seeking therapy or psychological help of one form or another. Kyler's story represents that. He was unable to get the help that he needed until he was on his way out. I simply want to say that there are many ways to find help. If you are experiencing suicidal ideation, call 988 immediately within the United States and get immediate help. If you're in the middle of deconstruction and you need someone to speak to, you can speak to someone immediately from the Recovering from Religion Foundation, both web-based and on the phone. Links will be in the show notes for that. And then finally, if you're looking for a secular therapist, I recommend the Secular Therapy Project. You can find therapists in your area, as well as telemedicine, who are not going to tell you to pray harder. Please, if you find yourself in a place where you need help, reach out and find help. Next week, we have Benoit Kim, who is the host of the Discover More podcast. Benoit is not the traditional guest for this podcast. He and I disagree on a number of things, including the fact that he is a Christian, as well as his very strong interest in psychedelics in a clinical psychological setting. But at the same time, we have a lot in common. What I would call secular grace, Benoit is interested in helping people become the best that they can be. It is a fascinating conversation, and I hope that you will check it out next week. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast